So everybody, welcome to this Aspira Roundtable event. It's part of a Roundtable leadership series where we're focusing on one topic with a limited group of what we consider to be industry leaders, i.e. yourselves, with the aim to share and identify best practices that can help address real issues or opportunities in your organization today. We see this as a collaborative exercise. Every one of you here today is an expert in your own right, and we see this roundtable as an opportunity for us all to learn, as well as pool and share knowledge with a view to gaining a collective insight. In the past, we've covered a host of challenging topics such as digital transformation, enterprise PPM, and agile PPM on our last one. Today, we have a similarly exciting lineup of content and speakers, but I'll cover off that with the agenda later. So to kind of set the scene, today's event is entitled Journey to the Cloud, Real-World Challenges and Solutions. The IT technological revolution, when you think about it, we talk about like the industrial revolution leading to technology revolution, started for a lot of us with mainframe, then evolved into PC and client server. Then we had web apps coming on the scene to replace the old thick clients. Then we move into the terms of virtualization and now a cloud. This is all driving the pace of change in business exponentially. IT has over time, from my experience, moved from being a business support function to a business delivery position in organizations. And the more IT delivers in terms of frontline business, the more the business wants and needs to be competitive and meet customer demands. And when do they want it? Typically for everybody on this call, they want it yesterday. So we're being challenged to be more adaptive, flexible and agile to meet these demands. But in the sense of how's that translating into modernizing our applications? So if I take a look back in 2016, PwC in their CEO Global Survey found that 86% of CEOs saw technology as the trend to change their business more than any other in the next 5 years. So we're 5 years on. Has it happened? If not, why not? Certainly the pandemic has recently forced changes in the way we work and do business, but is it deep and really at the application layer? In the same survey from PwC in 2021, they've noted that 72% of Irish CEOs feel that skills shortage is one of the major threats to their business growth. So is there a correlation between a perceived slow transition and skills availability? Maybe. To back that up as a thought, the European Commission in their 2020 skills shortage report, which obviously takes account of the pandemic as well, identified 5 software-related roles in the top 10 critical skills shortages across the EU. So 50% of the critical skills shortages were in 5 software development type roles. So whether it's regulatory, lack of skills, or even plain fear, in other words, if it's not broken, don't fix it. When it comes to the concept of application modernization or taking legacy applications and moving to the cloud, there's certainly a lot of talk, papers and opinions, but maybe a slower adaptation than expected. Our session will look at it from a more pragmatic approach. We'll talk about the concept of looking how to model your needs and identify challenges, as well as some practical application. So for now, let me get proper introductions out of the way, say hello to everybody, but given that we're tight on time, I won't go around the table for introductions. I'll just say a quick hello on behalf of. So on the list for today, we have invited, I can't see who's joined in now or not just at the minute, but we've got Govin from Allergen, we've got Dan from AMCK, Reen from BME, Owen from the Central Bank, Joanne from Dairy Gold, Padar and Bobby joining us from Digital 14 in the UAE, Julie from Erbia, Philip, Mukta and Vida from K3, Tom from Kerry, John from McPhee, John again from Musgrave, Gillian from PTSB, Sinead from the Road Safety Authority, Yas and Sandra from Vattenfall, and Tim from Westcon. So now, if we just have a quick run through on our agenda. So we have 3 short sessions. First up will be Denis Kennelly, who's an industry thought leader in cloud, having led related practices in Motorola, Dell EMC, and now is general manager for storage at IBM. Denis has global experience in hybrid cloud and can talk to some of the challenges that companies are facing that he's coming across. Denis will be followed by our own CTO Colum. Colum has extensive experience stretching from legacy on-premise to born in the cloud applications. He'll kick off with an overview of the model that we have been developing around app modernization and planning for it. And then Colum will be followed by our solution architect, Shidin. And Shidin is going to do a demonstration around a Power App just to show what the end result can look like. And finally, we have Ian Ian is one of our senior developers, and Ian is going to manage the Q&A session that will kick off and feed into our roundtable. So that is basically looking at using a tool called Menti. We'll explain more about how we're going to use that later. Now I have to do the sales bit. You know, as the man says, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So I just have to spend 2 minutes talking about Aspira and reminding you all about what we are and what we do. So with our primary offices located in Netherlands and Ireland, we're across Europe operating in the Middle East and Asia with 231 clients in over 26 countries. We're a fast-growing project consulting and technology company. We focus on real-world experience, and a uniqueness is when you look at our 6 areas of operation. We stretch across standard infrastructure into software development, consulting, project management, training, low code, as well as heavy development. So in short, we have the proven people and expertise to lead the delivery of projects and help build capability to deliver them successfully and long into the future. We stretch across a number of verticals. So we're operating in the public sector, retail, pharma, energy, and there's just a selection there on the screen of the different areas we've been working in. Some of you are on the are listed up here as well, so don't call me out. And with that, just to touch on the housekeeping for today, we will be making the presentations available in PDF form, so there's no need to scribble mad notes. And as I mentioned, we're recording right now, but the recording will be stopped when we move into the roundtable end. And we could ask everybody to go on mute if you're not already, just to allow us get through things kind of cleanly. If you have any questions, post them up in the chat box or raise your hand if it's opportune. We will gather the questions and use them to feed in at the Menti session as well. We'll try and make sure every point is covered. If we don't get to every question, we'll follow up at the end, or we can hang on at the end if people want to stay around at the end to have a chat. We have some optional time there of about 15 minutes at the end. And as these are a series of sessions that we're doing, and there'll be a quick survey there, the mandatory kind of obligatory type thing, if you wouldn't mind spending a couple of minutes to fill it out, just so we can see where we can improve going forward. So with that, I shall duly hand over. Colum is going to kick us off with an intro.
Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate, the expertise of the people in the room is all about what this is about. We hope that you as a contributor will learn as much from the person virtually beside you as you will from anyone who presents some slides. So this is genuinely a roundtable. It is not a presentation. So today what we want to talk about is the real politic of cloud for mature enterprises. It's not about blue skies, it's not about greenfield startups, it's not about the born in the cloud situation. You're all here because you're in the enterprise. Some of you maybe have been our large enterprise who are more close to born in the cloud, but for most of us, we're looking at the challenge of how to deliver business value using the existing IT infrastructure and how to modernize those applications and move them forward in the cloud. So, we have 3 speakers today. So Denis is a very interesting perspective from an IBM perspective, who have been very active in app modernization and public cloud and private cloud and hybrid cloud. And he will talk about the challenges their clients and those that they speak to are experiencing all the time. I'm going to go a bit more specific in talking about one area. I mean, I would say overall, it's not possible for us to cover everything in application modernization. So people may be disappointed that the thing they really want information on is not here. So please ask that and share your experiences. But for me, I'm going to talk specifically about if you are on that journey to modernize your application suite, how do you develop your roadmap? What's our road mapping process, tools, or framework are you going to use? And I think there's some interesting discussions there about how different organizations use frameworks to map their experience. And then finally, we'll take a specific example of how low-code, no-code platforms can fit into application modernization and show how the process actually works. So Denis is going to just speak for a few minutes now and just have a very quick introduction into his view of application modernization and the slow and steady transition to the cloud. So Denis, if you can unmute yourself there, I'll just put you up.
Thank you, and glad to be on and just offer a bit of insight. So, as Jason said, I run storage for IBM right now, but I've been in this hybrid cloud space for the last 10 years or so with IBM. And just before we get to the slides, I suppose one stat just to kind of set context, and I think Colum touched on it, right? Look, I think Amazon probably launched the first service 2006, 15 years ago, right? So, in terms of technology shifts and move to the cloud, 15 years is a lifetime, as we know. If you think about mobile, think about PC adoption, think about those other waves. But yet, 15 years down the track, if you look at core enterprises, and we've done some research on this, about 20-25% of enterprise applications are running on clouds today. So begs the question, why so slow? And I think, what's on the chart are some of the real challenges, right? So, you have a lot of different workloads and applications and, compliance needs and enterprise data. I mean, you're all in, a lot of you are in regulated industries, and these become big challenges. You do see pockets and, of technology being adopted in multiple clouds. And when I talk about clouds, I'm also including SaaS, because you might go for a vertically integrated stack for certain applications. And lots of architectures around the place. And then I think one of the things that, this always, it's not just technology, but in a lot of cases, this really comes down to the people side. And what we call a technology generation gap. And us and them developing. So you have the legacy and the new, and how do you actually bridge that? We see that a lot in clients, right? You see a lot of customers starting up, an agile team or a set of scrum teams of 10, 20, 30 people, and kind of going at cloud native net new, and it's wonderful. And the legacy are still, working in the past, and that creates all sorts of problems within the organization. Within IBM, our goal, or what we're striving, the vision we're driving, is that you build once and deploy anywhere. It's a multi-cloud world. It's a multi-hybrid cloud world, because the target destination can be a hyperscaler, private cloud, edge, a data center. So, you really have to design and build for that. Obviously, you've got to think about security everywhere and build security in the current climate, and make sure you have open interfaces, because we live in a world, a global economy, so you have to have open everywhere. And then coming back on the people side, making sure you have the culture and the skills transformation that's core to this, because this is not a technology problem. In fact, I think this is probably a bigger issue than the actual technology itself, and making sure you have the skills for these new technologies. So you go next chart. So, how do you start in the journey? Like every problem, you got to understand the problem. You got to understand what you have, right? I know this sounds obvious, but you'll be surprised, when we talk to clients, is, that they target one area, but really have, and maybe look at one particular application. But when you look at that, as you look at the portfolio and landscape, there are dependencies and affinity groups all over the place. There's no application that's an island. It always has dependencies on data and other things across the organization. So when you actually pull on that thread, you realize, oh crap, right? Now there's a dependency over here, which causes another knock-on effect over here. And really you have to get a full picture of that. And then based on that, and based on your requirements, based on some of the things I talked about, be it compliance, be it, target runtimes, be it, the level of innovation and the number of services you got to innovate, you got to look at different options in terms of executing on your roadmap, and really making sure you build a plan. That's basically what we're saying here. Then if we go next chart, and I'm going through this quickly, guys, because just to kind of give you a sense of where you are. But this is kind of the core of where everybody is at right now. And there's a lot going on this chart, right? You heard me say at the top, about 20%, 25% of enterprise applications have moved to the cloud. In actual fact, an awful lot of that is over on the left. It's what we call lift and shift. So that, yes, they've shut down the data center. It looks like they've moved to the cloud, but the actual workload itself, nothing has changed. It's just running on different metal in a different data center. And in some cases, the value that customers have got from that, it's actually more expensive, because you're not taking, if you have an application that was designed for, a single server in a fixed infrastructure, it's not taking advantage of any of the cloud economics that the cloud is designed for. It's not just about outsourcing an application. And a lot of what we see right now is, A lot of the early moving is in that lift and shift. And then as you go through this, there's different steps along the way, where we see a lot of what's happening right now. And this is kind of the core of where actually we see a lot of customers dealing with these 3 steps in the middle, which is really starting to look at these applications based on the plan that I talked about, and really starting to look at, first basic remediation, getting rid of, the obvious, like end-of-life components, looking at the application versus the workload. Workload migration is what we call lift and shift. Application is really looking at application and starting to incrementally introduce pieces as you go along. Take, for example, and I don't know what Colum and the team are going to talk about, when you look at low code, no code, we see a lot of customers putting that, for instance, in front-ending a mainframe. And that's a typical example, because if you want to bite off the full thing end to end, it's a huge problem, but you can start to remediate pieces. Likewise, you can start to refactor pieces. You can start to take pieces of the application that are bottlenecks when it comes to performance scale, that are impacting your business. And maybe you want to get cloud scale on those pieces of the application, start to refactor those. And then, also then start to re-architect over time. But it is very iterative as you go through this. And in some cases, you may say, screw it, this is too much, you go far right and you got to reimagine. And when we say reimagine, it's not rewrite, it's rethink the whole business process and how you're delivering that process. Because it's not about rewriting in technology, reimagining the business process. And customers are right across this spectrum right now, but the real action is right in the middle here. So if we go next chart, Jason, so why does this fail? Why are we 15 years into this? I think, there are 6 reasons here. Number one, it's not, the business gives up on it, it's not giving the business value. It goes back to the lift and shift. A lot of customers shut down data centers and saying, hey, my IT spend has gone up as a result, and I am not able to move any quicker. Infrastructure modernization, not application modernization. The spend is in application and actually application development, and really making sure that you modernize that. Number 3, it's a technology. I have a tool, what's the problem, right? I have the answer, what's the problem? If you don't really understand how you're using a tool, then you're going to have serious problems. Then there's big bang approach. You see, in a lot of cases, you see top down, okay, we're moving to the cloud, we're going to be there in 12 months. Yeah, if you follow that to the letter of the law, you run into some of these issues that I talked about. The lack of a coexistence plan, the us and them scenario that I talked about, that's a huge issue as people go through this transition. And obviously having the funding and making sure that everybody the stakeholders fully understand what's involved. I think if you consider those 6 things, you will have a successful modernization journey. I know I spoke quickly and went through that quickly, but hopefully you got a sense of our point of view. Look, as IBM, we're right in the middle of this. A lot of these estates are IBM estates, so we have to understand that. And the last thing I would say is, we're not tree-hugging those existing estates. We understand customers are going to move, and we are helping them move along that journey. All right, Colum.
That's brilliant, Denis. Thank you very much. And again, yeah, I think we'll have plenty of time to speak in the round table about the questions and answers that people might have in the specifics. So it's great, and thanks for getting through that efficiently. Okay, so yeah, as Jason said, yeah, my name's Colum Horgan. I'm CTO at Aspira here. I spend most of my career in large enterprises trying to solve these problems. I've also done startups, kind of cloud native, so I do know the other world, but that's not what we're talking about today. So I suppose there always has to be the obligatory quotation slide. So I suppose, Mark Andreessen says, software is eating the world about 15 years ago. I think the reality today is we all probably reckon that software is being eaten by the cloud at this point. And the question I suppose I would say as well is, to Denis's point, we've all been preached to for 15 years about the pace, and this is inevitably where it's going to go, and if you don't accept this, you're a Luddite, and so on. There's another favorite quote of mine, which is, from a futurologist, which is pretty much everything I've ever predicted has come to pass. Might have been out by a decade or two, but who's counting? So we're not here today, and in our jobs, we're not here to say, well, exactly when are we going to get to 80% of cloud adoption? We have a reality of a suite of applications that deliver business value right now, and it's our responsibility to move that in a pragmatic way to continue and increase the business value we're delivering through our IT. So we're not looking to be the visionaries. We're not looking to prove some kind of technological point. We are practically trying to deliver the business value. So we're talking about modernization, and as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to cover everything in modernization or move to the cloud. But I think, again, this very much echoes Denis's definition. Typically, the strategies we're talking about, just to get common definitions here, we're talking about, the rehost, lift and shift, whether that's infrastructure as a service, private cloud. At the other extreme, we're looking at replacing. So, I think you call it revisioning there, Denis, where, you're deprecating an application and deciding, well, we want that application or something like it or something better to be delivered through a different solution, possibly a SaaS application. And in the middle, as Denis mentioned, there's the very confused and sometimes untidy rebuild, re-architect, modernize solutions. So, what's really important is things that we can do that improve on an iterative basis how those applications work with a plan to move to an end game as well. So you're looking at things like microservices architectures, containerization strategies. Connectivity, and again, Denis touched on this, is really important because there are dependencies between applications which may not work in a full public cloud. So whether it's an old service bus strategy or it is in full REST API or somewhere in between, integration is a key concern for us. And again, I know Denis touched on this as well. Actually, having your application suite work with the way you want to develop in the future is hugely important. Whether that's agile, decoupling functionality for scalability, all of those things are hugely important. And another important point is that there are standalone cloud services which are really excellent at taking some workload from your core application. You can, as you say, front end them, or you can pass a very heavy billing workload off to a service in the public cloud without touching your core solution. So I just want to get the language straight there. This is typically what we're talking in the modernization journey. So what I want to talk about is if you're an organization looking to move and to create a roadmap, and again, it mirrors what Denis was showing as well. What is such a roadmap looking like? So for the next 3 or 4 minutes, I think it could be useful because we've heard plenty of clients talking about their different approaches to doing this. So that's become a framework in our world. There are public frameworks. I know IBM has a framework. All of the consulting companies have frameworks. But many of your organizations may have created your own or customized something, and I think that's a really valid way of doing things. So what we found is that you start with the data you have in your organization, whether you've got information in CMDBs and ticketing systems that tell you about your suite of applications and how they operate right now. Now, once you have that information, that's just data. It is not true actionable information. You need to apply your experts to this to actually take a subjective view about how this is working. Now, what a framework is very good at is having a consistent way of having those discussions. So you have your experts, both your internal experts, but also people who can benchmark with the outside world to tell you what's possible. And really, that's the core of any application road mapping framework. And typically what you end up with is a group of categories of items or drivers that fall into either your business problem, or the business drivers for the decision making, or the technology risks and opportunities. And that could break down into 50 or 100 separate areas. But the idea with a framework, whether it's external or internal, is that you have a consistent way of looking at that you, in that whole organization, can buy into, and they say, this is our approach. And we have thought through all of the potential risks and issues of some people who've got a great vision, as opposed to the practical realities of making these moves. So what I thought would be useful was to look at an example. What does that actually look like in the real world? And I took a simplified version of a typical portfolio and a number of applications. Now, there's lots of nice different ways of presenting this data. I like the radar chart because it can be forced to give you a very graphical view of cloud readiness, of modernization readiness. So just to show what we're talking about here, we're showing 5 applications to simplify things, and we've seen in 10 broad areas how close they are to being ready to modernize or ready to move to the cloud in some form or other. I think it'd be useful just to go through these quickly. So on the right-hand side, we effectively have our business drivers. Look at things like how critical to the business is this application. That makes it less attractive to move to the cloud without doubt. And the way the scoring has been done is to force the cloud-ready applications out towards the periphery, out to number 5, whereas the ones at the core are the ones you're going to have more struggles with. So, whether you're looking at whether the criticality of the business, of the application to the business, or whether how much of the business value is being actually worked through this application, again, down to the core value of the application. You look at things like cost of operations and, how it aligns with your enterprise architecture. There's a lot of detail in there, but if your application doesn't align, that can be a very good reason to target it for a transition or a modernization. And then on the left-hand side, you're looking at your technology drivers. You're looking, well, is the application in itself ready to move to the cloud? Does it help and support the way we want to work in our deployment model? That the application itself, is it in a supported language? Is it a language that is core to our organization and that we can get the staff to maintain? So a lot of these drivers, and your organization is very important, needs to take whatever framework we've got and make it your own. You have to weight these factors in a way that makes sense for your organization and then drive forward with a consistent framework across the organization. So I won't go through it in a huge amount of detail, but just when you look at the business drivers, you're looking at detail. Some of this is just plain information from your system. So how many active users does the application have? Does it contain customer data? Look at cost of operations, your hosting costs, your maintenance costs, your support tickets. So you're gathering all the information that you've got, and you're then trying to make decisions based on it. And from the technology, you'll see again, how well does an application map to your enterprise architecture? So, this is a custom application. We've decided for most of our core systems, we're going with a platform, an XRM system or something. So that in itself can trigger. So all of these points help to drive your decision and to show you graphically which applications you really should prioritize for your modernization. So I just go back to this chart and really effectively, in reality, what we've done is we've seen that there's one application out here, which is, it looks to me, it's very ready for the cloud. It's not a critical application. It doesn't particularly fit in with our architecture and so on. So, in this case, this is a holiday tracking, a leave tracking application, typical low value non-core application. Whereas if you take the other extreme, we're looking at an application here, which has got in many areas, looks like very unattractive to modernize or to move to the cloud. And this is a core system. It's a warehouse and stock control system. If anything happens to this application, there would be a huge issue. And it's complex, it's difficult. So there's a lot of indicators there that show you on your roadmap, this should not be at the front end of your roadmap. So I suppose just to kind of summarize overall what I'm saying with the road mapping process, you've got to own and drive this process. It's what your organization defines as its plan for the next 5 to 10 years on moving your application suite. So you have to start with the data. You have to start with what information you already know. You then have to put a subjective lens on it to say, well, how do the experts in the business and externally feel we should go forward with this? And inevitably, you have to make sure that you're looking at both the business side of things, but also on the technology risks and opportunities of the application itself. So as I say, this is a reasonably specific area, and I'd be very interested in hearing people's experience with when you've developed your roadmap. Have you used the process? Is it still in, are you starting the process now, or are you well down the track? And what wrinkles have you found when you've tried to use a consistent process to make a decision? So I'm just going to hand over now to Shidin. So Shidin is a lead consultant with Aspira in our business applications. He's been working with clients for us currently working with a partner here that's on the call, K3, and they're working on a large e-commerce system with IKEA, I think I'm allowed to say. So one of the, I mentioned briefly about the application, the different applications that may be targets for modernization. And one of the interesting approaches that Denis also mentioned is, well, where does low code and no code come into this whole scenario? And the application we managed to come up with in our portfolio plan was that was ready for modernization was a peripheral application for leave tracking. And we all aware of these types of application. And what Shidin is going to do is just walk through, well, if you had made that decision, why would you use the low code, no code solution for this? And what's the process like? What does it look like? And how is that managed? So I will hand over to Shidin if he's ready. I hope he's got control of the slides up.
Yeah, I do have control. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Colum. I'm Shidin. I'm a lead consultant at Aspira, focusing on the Power Platform. And today I'll be touching upon the business applications and most probably the cloud platforms, which will help us to modernize our application portfolio. As Denis said, there are quite a few low-code, no-code platforms out there in the market. The one I'm focusing on is Microsoft's offering in this space. It's called the Power Platform. Speaking of the Power Platform, this is nothing but a suite of applications, SaaS modeled, from Microsoft to streamline your productivity apps. And basically, they offer a seamless way to connect all the data between these apps to each other. And this common data, they share a common data. There are data connectors which can be used to talk to each other. This is what Microsoft refers to as the common data service, which is part of their open data initiative. And the main reason, or the enabler for all this, is nothing but Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud offering. Now, speaking about the platform itself, there are three main or distinct areas. One, we have what we call the Powerapps. This is the application layer through which we can build out our apps. And there are different variations of it. We have typical enterprise level line of business applications such as CRM, going back to building out productivity apps such as a leave tracker system. We have workflow orchestration or automated business process flow engine. Microsoft termed it the Power Automate. This literally is the glue which allows each service to talk to each other. And on the other end, we have Power BI, which is a way to slice, dice, and visualize all this data. And if I look at what are the applications which can talk to each other, I've just put in some common applications which every enterprise might be using now, be it Outlook, spreadsheets, SharePoints, so on. And so before I jump into the demo, I just want to show you what this demo would look like. Say I have a leave tracker system, and say I have an employee who submits a leave request, or maybe 3 employees. For simplicity's sake, I'm saying all of them report to the same manager. The manager has to either reject or approve their request, and this needs to be notified back to the employee. So this is the flow I would be showing in the app itself. As I mentioned, this is completely built on Microsoft's low-code offering called the Power Platform. Let me jump into the app now. So this is the app which was built out. I've done some minor modifications. So at first, I'm going to log in as an employee to show you the employee experience. So because I'm already signed into my Office 365, it just has single sign-on enabled. It knows who I am. And the app on my left-hand side, I get to see what are my leave balances. I see different kinds of leaves. I see the company holidays. And for each of these leaves, I have a detail on what each means and how to take those. So let's say I go and start off with a vacation request, maybe sometime for next week. And as I see it's calculating the current balance and the new balance, what will be. And I have to choose my manager. Now this is reading from Office 365 again, the list of employees. And let's say I'm just going to put it PTO probably 2 days, and I'm going to submit the request. So in the backend, what's happening is it's actually submitting a request to the database or where this list is maintained. It is also notifying my manager that a request has been submitted. So if I go back to my leave request, I see there is a pending PTO for 2 days. And the meantime, as the manager, I did get an email notification directly into Outlook. And I'm just keeping the template very simple, saying there's a leave request from employee, what's the details, the start day and end day, at which point the manager would log into the system. Let's say, let me log out and log in as the manager. And I see there are 2 requests which are waiting to be approved. So let's take the first one. And let's say I'm going to approve it as the manager. And this again updates the data source on the fly. It informs the employee that it is approved. And I have an optional message as well. So just going to like and send it. So this makes sure that the leave is approved, and it sends an email to the employee, which I just got in right now, along with the custom message from the manager that's there. So very simple process. Now, if I look at how this was built out on this platform, so this is an example of what we call a canvas app, because the idea is that you start from a canvas, you start from basically a blank screen. And then on the blank screen, you start putting in things you need. There are a lot of components, like we can just start putting buttons, screens, media, whatever we need. So if I look at the app, which is already built, it's kind of categorized into different screens. I have the home screen, I have a new request screen, then I have separate screens for managers. So if I look at the login screen itself, right, I need to change things. So all of these components are interactable. So I can just go and interact with each of them. I can change my logos. And if I look at what this button click actually does, as you can see at the very top, I get to see what is it doing. And this low-code one is what Microsoft calls Powerapps. It's loosely based on the Excel formulas which are out there. So it will really help us to, you don't need to learn separate coding skills for it. It's just kind of in familiar territory. And once I make any changes, so let's say instead of the transition, I can change it to, and it has this auto IntelliSense one. So as we type out formulas, it starts suggesting what should be the next one or what could help it. So that's there, the transition done. And I will always be able to save the app, and then I will be able to publish it. So this is under the hood what is happening, or how I build the app, and I publish it and share it with all my different teammates or within the organization. If I look at what is the data source for this, it's very simple. It is basically a spreadsheet which is driving this entire app. So on the spreadsheet, I get to see that those are the different entries. I see those are the holidays I specified in the spreadsheet and the balance for a particular employee. Now, the Power Platform can connect to various different data sources. I just chose to have the most simplistic one, which is a spreadsheet. And what I was trying to show here is how you can have a spreadsheet-based process, and you can actually transform it digitally. You can make it come alive by putting a Canvas Power App on it. And the key takeaways I want to show here is, one, how this Power Platform can actually offer a low-code, no-code offering to the business users, so they can actually bring their ideas to life with minimal efforts or coding skills. And the second one, for the development teams out there or the pro developers, the Power Platform actually is an accelerator for the existing projects. They'll be able to use certain components to bridge the gaps, which will help them to get there faster.